Okay. So, thinking about word study, I know we had kind of like that big picture or that big question that we were asking about, but I want to give you some time just to kind of reflect back on word study in general.
Right. Yeah. At the end, I really love being able to come together as a whole class because even though, you know, they do have different sorts, I think that they can learn from the different techniques from one another, and just how like they were saying that they were able to recognize different things while they were doing buddy sort, that like, oh, I didn't do my sort and write all correctly, and then my partner was able to show me like the correct way. So because all year we talk about how you learn so much from each other if you just stop and listen.
Sure.
And so like being able to like see that full circle all the time when we come together, and you know, I love our carpet time, you know what I mean? I love always sitting, you know, in our circle and things like that because they can really come together and just share their thinking and whatnot. And we do so much throughout the day and how that translates. Like we don't just have to do that with reading and writing. You know, like we do our turn and talks during math now, you know, and different things like that and how that goes. So just being able to hear that and how a lot of them were able to adjust their thinking and their learning based off of what their partner had said, like that's what I like to hear.
Sure. Because that's feedback for you.
Right, exactly. So I'm like, okay.
Yeah, and at the same time, it's feedback for them, student to student kind of feedback. Someone might have shared something, and someone just listening is going, "Did I do that?
Right.
That, you know, did I?"
Exactly, and I think that that's definitely important, being able to share out those thoughts. So, like having that time, I think is very important, and I'm glad that we do as much as we can. And so I'm glad that we took the time to do that today as well.
Sure. Really important part. That sounds like that's an important part for you.
Yeah,
you hold value in that coming together and that sharing.
And horse buses
Yes.
are here.
Yes, I do, because I value a lot in their thinking, you know, because I feel like that drives my instruction a lot of the time, hearing their thoughts, because like if they can't translate it to me, then I know that we need to go back and kind of readjust and things like that. So, you know, they may be able to do something on paper, but if they can't talk about it, or share their thinking with someone else, that makes me think that, you know, I'm not getting to you in the way that I would like to.
Like it's another level of knowing. How deep do you know something?
Exactly.
If you can clearly articulate it, then you feel that you have the assurance that, okay, they've got this.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, definitely. And, you know, with my two back here, they do have reading goals for an IEP and things like that. So, like, I don't know if you heard them talk about layer cake and things like that. That's something, I think it's the program Stevenson. I'm not too familiar with it. But, like, that, I think layer cake, as what I picked up on this year, it seems to be their, like, vowel consonant E words.
Okay.
So something about the icing and things like that.
So it's a strategy they're helping to.
Yeah, and with them, I was actually surprised with some of the words
B-bus and
that they were
zebra
unfamiliar
bus.
with
B
as far
and
as
zebra
like, the
buses
sounds.
are here.
Like being able, you know, for the most part they were able to recognize like, oh, you know, A. But then in the beginning, Matt was saying when I asked what the vowel was in the word, he said S and T. And I said, you know, so like in my mind I was like, okay, like I thought we were secure with our vowels, you know, so I feel like that's going to be a moment that I need to go back and reteach, especially like within his reading group or different things like that to touch on those vowels.
And to watch for when he's doing some word solving.
Yeah, because he seems like when in our reading groups, I've never noticed that, you know what I mean, with him not being able to recognize vowels and consonants. So I was very interested to see now that the words are kind of like isolated, you know, like single words. So not being able to recognize it that way, so I thought that was something that I'll definitely have to circle back to. Yeah,
and that could be an easy thing. Like when he's in his reading group and he's, you know, you're listening in and kind of coaching with his reading, just, you know, to stop and say, you know, put your finger on this word. Point to the vowels. What vowels or what consonants are in that word? Just a little. Yeah, like just a little checkup.
Absolutely.
It could be a fluke thing.
And that, exactly.
But
thinking, you know, maybe he was just confused because sometimes he is one that definitely gets in his head a lot.
Sure.
And so it could have been just a fluke thing for sure. But it puzzled me at first. I was like, okay, like no.
Well, but I think that's valid in checking.
Right.
Let's just make sure.
No, absolutely, because it's important to know. Yeah.
I think the way that you work with word study in your groups, you would think about the alternative. like probably when you and I went to school,
Oh, yeah.
we would be at our desk working from a book,
Right.
things
yeah,
like
our
that.
phonics book.
And you would never know that
Right.
because he never articulated.
Right.
There'd be no reason for you to wonder, I better check and make sure he's clear on the
Right.
difference between consonant and vowels.
Oh yeah. I always think about that often, like when I was in 5th grade, we all had the same list.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like we all, and you memorize those words like crazy for Friday. Like
Sure.
you practice those like, oh yeah. And so like, I love that it's different. And I love I just feel like with word study, there's not that stress. You know what I mean? Like, because we go through the activities and things like that. And if you don't get it, then we go back over it.
Okay.
Like, you know what I mean? Like in the classroom, we do that. Whereas, like if I didn't understand a word, it was my parents helping me.
Right.
You know what I mean? So being able to kind of have that learning in the classroom, like I would love it if they all practice their words at home, but I know that they don't. You know what I mean? But it's also good to know that if they don't practice the words at home, they're not going to fail. Like if they don't take them home. Whereas like growing up, if you didn't practice your words at home, you weren't going to do well
Right.
on your spelling test on Friday.
Right.
So I love being able to see that and the strength that word study comes in that aspect.
Being able to manipulate
Right.
words and talk about words with somebody else,
Right.
I think is really powerful.
Oh yeah.
And then, but in both cases, the way you and I experienced it, I don't know that my teachers ever thought about the transfer. To be honest with
Right.
you, it's just like something we
Yeah.
did it for that week, and if you got 100 on Friday, you're good to
Yeah,
go. And if
exactly.
you didn't get 100 Friday,
Right.
we're moving
Yeah,
on.
or you
and-
had like your challenge list or different
Yeah.
things like that. Like,
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Definitely.
But you're very mindful of the transfer. Like,
Mhm.
if they're spending the time,
Right.
and it's not that transfer is in both places in
Mhm.
word study. Transfer is in the word solving they do as readers,
Right.
and it's also in the writing that they
Mhm.
do.
Right.
And I don't think we clarified that before.
Right.
Well, I take that back. You did say you transfer in their writing.
Right. But like now that you say that though, like about having the different types of transfer
Mhm.
and things like that, I think that's important too.
It might be that, we're thinking about ways that we could, get that transfer and go back to that question that we created. Will prompting increase transfer into their writing? But we could say prompting increase the transfer in their reading as well.
Right,
That might be
absolutely.
something you could do
Especially-
at the guided reading table.
Right, and to recognize those features and different things like that. I think that's important.
And I'm thinking, what would it do for? What were the students here? I didn't catch their names. I'm so sorry.
No, you're right, Ethan and Matt.
Ethan and Matt.
Yes.
Like with Ethan and Matt being your lower
Mhm.
within word group, if they're at the guided reading table and it's the same principle that they're working on this
Right.
week, if there are words in their own books
Mhm.
that whether they read them correctly or whether they have to grapple with them to do
Mhm.
some word solving, that prompting might come in
Right.
and let's take a look at that word. Does that
Right.
look familiar? Does that have a familiar pattern to
Mhm.
you? That's like the pattern that we're working in word study.
Okay.
I'm wondering if that
Right.
might be almost like a revelation
Absolutely,
for them.
yeah.
Because sometimes
'Cause they have
kids
that-
compartmentalize everything.
Exactly, you know what I mean? And like,
You know?
I'm guilty of that sometimes, Yeah.
Yeah.
Now it's just like, I want you to be able to do this across the board, you know what I mean? And take that information and not just do it for the 20 minutes that we have it.
So,
You know?
so thinking about the transfer, maybe there's that intentional prompting
Mm-hmm.
that, you could do that with just that group right there, or you could branch it and do it in each of your groups.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're probably similar
Right.
in their word study.
Mhm.
You may not have the exact same kids together in guided reading, but they're probably very similar.
Right.
And so,
Absolutely.
how do you want to do that to see if let's talk about the transfer in reading
Okay.
and then talk about the transfer in writing.
Okay.
Would you want to prompt for that transfer in reading? Would you want to do it with like just these two fellas and see how that goes, or?
I think it's important that they all have that transfer, but to kind of have like a smaller focus right now, just to see how that works, and if it's evident that that my prompting does help, things like that. Maybe kind of doing that across the board then.
Okay.
Like, what do you think?
I think it's totally up
I'm
to
always
you.
up for input.
I'll
Because it's very important, I think, for them all to be able to transfer the information, though.
Sure.
So that's the only thing.
I would say my recommendation would be start with those two.
Okay, that's what I was
That way
thinking.
you just have to be intentional about that with one group.
Right.
And then, if you see that being productive,
Mm-hmm.
then that might be a great reason to try it with another group of kids.
Right.
Or,
Okay. That's
so
what
I
was
would.
thinking along
So
those
I'm
lines.
gonna. How about if we say like prompt? Maybe you're just prompting them to recognize words with the same pattern. This
Okay.
particular group.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay. Prompt to recognize. Because it doesn't have to be the same words. It's not about
Right.
that group. It's not about that list of words. It's about the patterns, being able to work and manipulate those.
Right.
What did you think about their ability to manipulate those, to sort those
Right.
today?
Yeah, I was with some of them, for the most part, I think it was A consonant E. Yeah, that was first. They did really well with those. But then
Okay.
it seemed like as we got down the line, they started to pair I consonant E. Oh no, what they did first was they put all the short vowels together. Which I
Okay.
was like, that is one way we could do it. So let's recognize what are the two different vowels. And then they were able to kind of readjust. But then even after that, they had one row that was kind of like a hodgepodge of all the different types.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's being able to go back and reread. Because especially with the two of them, it's important for them to hear the words rather than just to look at the words. You know what I mean?
I think that's key,
Yes.
Riley. And I'm wondering if that's what, because I was watching their faces, like when you prompt them,
Yeah.
and it's kind of like you didn't know what they were using to support themselves
Right.
because they weren't verbalizing.
Right.
So, and I would assume they seem so comfortable with you. So I wonder if you just
so.
go
Yeah.
ahead and prompt
Yeah.
them to say, say it out loud and listen,
Right.
so we can all begin to listen for that sound.
Oh, absolutely.
That might be something because their faces were just kind of like,
Yeah.
like they're looking for the answer
Yeah, right.
somewhere,
Exactly, yeah.
not realizing it's auditory.
Right.
They still, and kids who are working within Word, I think they need that auditory.
absolutely.
It doesn't
I agree.
matter,
Mhm.
what grade level you're
Right.
at, just those particular words.
Mhm.
So that might be something, well, actually, that could pop up in their guided reading too.
Right.
When they're looking, if
Mhm.
they're grappling with a word like that.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I wrote down prompt to recognize words with word study patterns.